On the cold morning of April 22, 2024, in Yukon, Oklahoma, a 911 call sent police and emergency responders rushing to a quiet home on Check Hall Road. The call came from a 10-year-old boy, the youngest of the Candy family, who said in a panicked voice, "My parents and my brothers, they're all dead." It was a scene that seemed like something out of a nightmare, but it was the heartbreaking reality the boy had just witnessed. The Candy family had long been considered the model of the ideal American family. Jonathan Candy, the 42-year-old father, worked part-time at the Paycom Center, which hosted major sporting and music events, including Oklahoma City Thunder games. His wife, Lindsay Terry, was a fun-loving woman who always made people laugh. They had 4 sons, Dylan, 18, Ethan, 14, Lucas, 12, and the youngest, age 10. This family was not just a regular family, but also a favorite of neighbors and friends. Dylan, the eldest son, had recently graduated from Mustang High School and had a passion for music. He played drums in the school band and was attending Oklahoma Baptist University, where he was a member of the Bison Brigade. Teachers and classmates described Dylan as having a big heart and always being willing to help others. Ethan, 14, was a talented baseball player at Mustang North High School. He was praised for his competitive spirit and leadership. Coach T.J. Armstrong said Ethan brought positive energy to the team and was his son's best friend. Lucas, 12, was an active, smart boy who enjoyed playing outdoors and participating in sports with his brothers. He was always on the soccer field when his brother practiced, and his friends remembered him as a boy full of energy and affection. The Candace family life seemed normal. From family photos filled with laughter and outings, everyone thought they were a happy and harmonious family. In an episode of Discover Oklahoma, Jonathan and Lindsay even shared their passion for pastries at a famous bakery nearby. Little details like Lindsay's love of carrot cake and Jonathan's constant laughter painted a picture of a perfect family. That morning, the youngest boy woke up like any other day. He heard nothing but the fire alarm ringing briefly, then everything fell silent. With the fan blowing air toward his bed, he couldn't hear what was happening outside his small room. When he stepped out around 9 a.m., he was shocked by the scene before him. The house was deathly silent, except for blood stains on the floor. His parents and 3 brothers lay motionless in pools of blood, all shot to death. In a panic, the boy called 911, reporting that his family had been murdered. When police and rescue workers arrived, they could not believe their eyes. Lindsay Candy, 39, and her 3 sons, Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas, were all dead. Jonathan Candy, the suspect, was also found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. At first, everyone thought it was a murder by an intruder, but the truth was much more horrifying. Jonathan, a father who everyone knew as a funny, caring, and loving man, was the one who murdered his wife and children. After killing them, he took his own life. Neighbors and friends could not believe what had happened. One neighbor said, "Jonathan was always a happy and kind person. I never thought he would do this." Dylan and Ethan's friends were shocked by their deaths, unable to understand how such a happy family could be murdered in such a brutal way. Why did Jonathan choose to kill his wife and children and then himself? Why was the youngest son spared while everyone else was killed? This question has puzzled investigators throughout the investigation. There were no obvious signs of domestic violence or serious conflicts in recent times. The Candy family, at least from the outside, had always appeared happy and close-knit. Investigators began digging into Jonathan's personal life, trying to figure out what might have led to his madness. They began looking into Jonathan's finances, his mental state, and his family relationships with his wife and children. After receiving the emergency call from the 10-year-old boy and conducting a search of the scene, the police began to collect every possible clue. The Candy family home became a gruesome crime scene. Blood was everywhere, and there was no sign of a struggle or resistance from the victims. This led investigators to ask, why was there no sign of a struggle? The police quickly confirmed that Jonathan Candy, the father, was the only suspect when a gun was found near his body. The scene painted a sad story. Jonathan had killed his wife and 3 children in turn, and then took his own life. However, one big question remained. Why did Jonathan spare his youngest son? The police could not immediately answer this question, but it was certainly an important factor to consider. Through interviews with friends, colleagues, and neighbors, the police began to reconstruct Jonathan's life. He was described as a funny man who always made people laugh. Most people who knew Jonathan were surprised and shocked by his actions. Jonathan worked part-time at the Paycom Center, which hosted major events such as Oklahoma City Thunder games. Jonathan's coworkers recalled that he always created a cheerful atmosphere at work and never showed any signs of a man facing difficulties or mental crises. He was always telling jokes, always making people feel comfortable. "I never saw him angry or showing any signs that this was going to happen," said one coworker. However, interviews with Jonathan's relatives began to reveal a different picture. Jonathan's wife, Lindsay, had shared with some relatives that the couple had recently been having financial arguments. Although no one expected these conflicts to lead to such a tragedy, it did raise questions about what was really going on in their relationship. Investigators began to look into the Candy family's finances, and what they discovered made the case even more complicated. Jonathan was only a part-time worker, while Lindsay was a housewife and looked after the children. The couple had 4 sons, and their living expenses were increasing. The family's financial records showed many unpaid debts, and there were signs that they were struggling financially. Among the documents found were medical bills, bank loans, and overdue credit cards. This led investigators to hypothesize that financial stress may have been one of the main factors that pushed Jonathan to the brink of despair. He may have felt that he could not provide for his family properly and gradually lost control under these pressures. Some of Jonathan's relatives also said that he had talked about his dissatisfaction with his job and his lack of accomplishment in life. He felt trapped in his role as a father and husband, but there was no way out of the burdens he was carrying. Police continued to investigate signs of marital strain between Jonathan and Lindsay. Relatives said that the couple had had many arguments in the months before the incident, mainly about finances. Lindsay had expressed concern about the family's future as debts piled up, while Jonathan felt he had no control over the situation. The night before the tragedy, Jonathan and Lindsay had a major argument. Relatives said that this may have been the last straw, as the two were unable to resolve the conflicts in their relationship. Jonathan, in a fit of anger and helplessness, may have gone berserk and lost control. These arguments, though not considered serious at first, became a key part of the question: what really happened in the final minutes? During a search of Jonathan's office, investigators found a diary that he had been keeping for months. The entries revealed frustration, abandonment, and disorientation. Jonathan wrote about how he no longer felt respected by Lindsay and that he was no longer the man the family needed. The diary also revealed darker thoughts about giving up everything and even expressed despair about the family's future. These entries provided clear clues that Jonathan had been experiencing a serious psychological crisis, but he had made no attempt to share or seek help. Investigators called in Dr. Joni Johnston, a forensic psychologist, to analyze Jonathan's behavior and thoughts. Based on the evidence collected, she determined that Jonathan may have suffered from severe depression and psychosis, but he hid it all under the guise of being a strong and humorous man. According to Dr. Johnston, depression in men often manifests differently than in women. They are less likely to share negative emotions and often hide their pain, leading to sudden emotional outbursts when they can't bear it any longer. Jonathan may have suffered for a long time without seeking support from family or friends. The investigation also began to focus on exploring other factors that may have affected Jonathan's psychology, including societal pressures on the role of a father and a breadwinner. While there are some important clues from Jonathan's personal and financial life, one big question remains. Why did Jonathan spare his youngest son? Did he have a last-minute moment of remorse, or was there a deeper reason for the special relationship between him and the boy? Investigators continue to analyze these details more closely, but no clear answers have been given. This makes the Candy family case more mysterious and complicated than ever. Investigators continued to probe Jonathan Candy's mental state, and the findings from his personal diary helped to reveal more important information. Through each page of his diary, Jonathan revealed increasingly negative thoughts about his family life and his role in it. Although he always tried to appear cheerful on the outside, Jonathan was carrying a huge psychological burden on the inside. Forensic psychologist Joni Johnston continued to analyze Jonathan's diary entries, and she realized that Jonathan had been suffering from severe depression, the type of depression that sufferers try to hide, maintaining a strong and normal appearance. In Jonathan's case, the depression and frustration had built up over many years without being resolved. Jonathan wrote that he felt he had lost control of his life. He felt like a failure not only to himself but also to his family, especially when the financial debt was piling up. This made him feel incapable of providing for and protecting the people he loved most. Part of the investigation focused on the social role Jonathan felt he had to shoulder. As a father of 4, Jonathan faced the pressure of raising a family and maintaining financial stability, something he increasingly felt he was unable to do. Although he was only a part-time employee at Paycom, he tried his best to support his family, but his efforts seemed insufficient to meet the needs of his wife and children. Jonathan did not share with anyone his feelings of being trapped and helpless. This only added to his mental pressure as he tried to maintain the image of a strong man. Jonathan's friends and colleagues said that he always tried to bring laughter to everyone around him, but no one knew that inside he was facing a serious psychological crisis. Psychologist Joni Johnston explains that for many men, admitting they are vulnerable or need mental health help can be difficult. Society often expects them to be the strong pillars of the family, and this can put pressure on them not to fail. Jonathan may have felt he was no longer in control, which led to deep despair. The investigation further uncovered details of an argument between Jonathan and Lindsay the night before the tragedy. According to relatives, this was not the first time the couple had argued about finances, but on that fateful night, the argument became more serious. Lindsay may have expressed concern about the family's mounting debts and unstable financial situation. She may have asked Jonathan to find a solution, which added to the stress Jonathan was already facing. In a moment of extreme stress, Jonathan may have lost control and made a terrible decision. Investigators speculate that in a fit of rage and despair, Jonathan killed his wife. But then he had to face the terrible consequences of his actions. He could not go back, and he could not let his children live with the fact that their father had killed their mother. Forensic psychologist Joni Johnston analyzed that Jonathan's actions may have been motivated by an acute mental breakdown, when a person falls into a state of uncontrollable despair. In Jonathan's case, he may have felt that there was no other way out but to destroy everything around him. Murder-suicides often occur when the offender feels that he has lost all control and has no hope. In Jonathan's disturbed mind, he may have believed that he could no longer live with his mistakes and therefore decided to kill himself to free himself. The act of killing his family before taking his own life suggests that Jonathan may have fallen into an extreme psychological state that cannot be explained by common sense. Investigators also ask, why did Jonathan not seek help? Family and friends did not see any obvious signs of a psychological crisis before the tragedy occurred. This makes them unable to understand why a cheerful and loving person like Jonathan could commit such a horrific act. This can be explained by the perspective that men tend to hide their psychological and emotional problems instead of seeking help. Jonathan may have felt too ashamed or weak to admit that he needed support. These thoughts, combined with financial pressure and a sense of failure in life, gradually led him to sink deeper into despair. The biggest question remains unanswered. Why did Jonathan spare his youngest son? Investigators have yet to find a specific reason, but they have a few theories. Perhaps at the last moment, Jonathan realized that the boy was too young to understand what was happening, or he had a belated regret when faced with his youngest son. Psychologist Joni Johnston analyzed that sparing the boy's life could be a sign that Jonathan still had a shred of humanity left in him despite his state of despair. Maybe he believed that by letting the boy live, he would not completely destroy his family. This is a question that will forever remain a mystery because no one can answer what was really going on in Jonathan's mind in his final moments. As the investigation proceeds, the community around the Candy family still has not come to terms with this heartbreaking truth. Friends and neighbors were shocked by the news of the massacre. Lindsay's family and friends said she had always been a loving mother and no one could have imagined that she would be victimized by her husband. "I never saw any signs of serious conflict between them," said a neighbor. "Jonathan was always so cheerful. We still can't believe this happened." Prayers and donations were held in the community to support the only surviving boy, but nothing could replace what he had lost. Friends of Dylan, Jonathan, and Lindsay's eldest son were devastated by the news of his death. Dylan, who loved music, was in the school marching band and was an energetic presence at every activity. His music teacher, Brian Stackhouse, recalled a special moment when Dylan was given a solo role in the band. Dylan couldn't sit still. He was so excited and happy that he couldn't wait to perform. It was a picture of a passionate, energetic, and promising boy. Ethan, 14, is remembered for his love of baseball. His coach, T.J. Armstrong, was heartbroken by his beloved student's death. He described Ethan as a promising athlete who always gave his all for the team and who brought optimism to those around him. Ethan had a smile that everyone will remember, and he was always willing to help his friends. His passing is a big loss not only to his family but to our team. Lucas, 12, was the most playful and outgoing of his siblings. His friends at Meadowbrook Intermediate described him as a ray of sunshine who always brought joy to those around him. He was often seen at his brother's soccer practices and was known as a friendly and approachable friend. The loss of the 3 children has left not only the family in pain but also the entire community. Friends and neighbors of the Candy family have said they cannot believe the heartbreaking truth. One neighbor, Brian Graham, described Jonathan as a man who was always willing to help others. Jonathan was a man you could count on. He would mow lawns, help with home repairs, and never complain. It's just unbelievable. Although the investigation has raised many theories and explored Jonathan's possible motives, there are still many unanswered questions. Why would a man who loved his family so much decide to kill the people he loved? Was he suffering from psychological problems that no one recognized? Or were there other factors in his personal life that pushed him to the brink of despair? Another psychologist called in to investigate, Dr. Joanna Smith, said that such cases often have more than one cause. She suggested that Jonathan's mental health, financial stress, and perceived isolation may have led to his brutal act. People like Jonathan often cannot cope with the conflict between the image they want to project to society and the sense of failure they feel in reality, Smith said. This may have created an unbearable pressure that led them to take this tragic path. While everyone was grieving the loss of the Candy family, all eyes were on the 10-year-old boy who was the sole survivor. He had to deal with not only the fact that his entire family had been murdered, but also that the father he loved had been responsible for the tragedy. This will be a terrible psychological burden that the boy will have to carry for the rest of his life. Relatives have taken him in, and he will receive psychological support throughout his recovery. Child psychologists have been brought in to work with him, helping him cope with his loss and gradually adjust to a completely different life than before. The community has raised money through GoFundMe pages to support the boy and ensure he has a safe and well-cared-for future. However, no amount of financial help can replace the immense loss he has suffered. After weeks of careful investigation, the police have officially concluded the Candy family massacre case. Evidence collected from the scene, Jonathan's personal diary, and testimony from relatives and friends have helped expose a heartbreaking story of a man who was overwhelmed by the pressures of life to the point of being unable to control himself. The case was closed with the conclusion that this was a murder-suicide. Jonathan C., a father who was respected and loved by everyone around him, killed his wife Lindsay and his 3 sons Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas before taking his own life. Financial pressure, personal failure, and psychological crisis are considered the main factors that pushed him to the brink. However, there are still unanswered questions. Why did Jonathan spare his youngest son? Did he have an epiphany at the last moment? This will forever be a mystery, because no one can answer the question, not even Jonathan himself. The only boy to survive the tragedy has been taken in and cared for by his family. However, his future is a challenging one. Psychologists warn that the loss and psychological trauma from this incident could affect him for the rest of his life. Not only does the boy have to face the loss of his entire family, but he also has to live with the painful truth that his father was the one who caused the tragedy. A long-term psychological support program has been arranged for the boy, with the aim of helping him overcome his grief and rebuild his life. The community in Yukon, Oklahoma has come together to donate and provide financial support for him, ensuring that he will be able to continue his education and develop in the future. But despite the help from everyone, the mental pain he has suffered remains an irreplaceable part of his life. The Candy family story has shocked not only the Yukon community but also the entire country. People are wondering how such a devastating tragedy could happen to a seemingly perfect family. Neighbors and friends of the family are still in disbelief about what happened, and many have turned to mental health services to help them cope with the shock. The Candy case has also become a heartbreaking lesson in the importance of mental health. Many men like Jonathan are suffering from stress and depression without seeking help for fear of being judged as weak or a failure. The case has sparked discussions about breaking down social stigmas around mental health, especially for men. Experts emphasize that there is no shame in seeking mental health help and that it can prevent similar tragedies from happening. Dr. Joni Johnston, a forensic psychologist who worked on the case, became a champion for mental health programs in the wake of the incident. "We need to create an environment where people feel safe to talk about their mental health issues," she said. If Jonathan had sought help sooner, it might not have gotten to this point. As the Yukon community continues to recover from the shock, they decided to hold a memorial service for the Candy family, especially to honor the 3 children, Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas, who lost their lives too soon. Dylan will always be remembered for his love of music, and his drumming in the school band will forever resonate in the hearts of those who loved him. Ethan, with his bright smile and passion for baseball, will forever be remembered on the field where he played. Lucas, a boy full of energy and optimism, will always be an inspiration to his friends and teachers. Neighbors and friends have erected a small memorial at the school and playground where the boys used to attend. The benches and plaques are engraved with the names of the victims as a symbol of irreplaceable loss, but also of the promising lives they once had. The Candy family tragedy is not only a heartbreaking story of loss but also a reminder of the power of helping each other in times of need. The community has come together not only to remember the Candy family but also to learn to recognize the early warning signs in those around them. The event has prompted many families in the area to start talking more openly about mental health. Counseling programs have been held in schools and churches in the area, helping people realize that no one is immune to the pressures of life and that help is available if they need it. With the help of his family, friends, and community, the only boy to survive this massacre will be surrounded by love and support to help him through his terrible pain. Although it will take time, he will have the opportunity to move on and build a new future, where he can find comfort and hope.